there is a night that William has lived with his entire life. August 31st, 1997. He was 15 years old, asleep at Balmoral Castle when the knock came at the door when his father walked in, when the words were spoken that no child should ever have to hear. Your mother is gone. William has carried that night for nearly 3 decades. The grief, the walk behind the coffin, the eyes of the world on a boy who was told to hold it together. He held it together for 27 years. And then recently he learned something about that night that he had never known before. Something about what was happening behind palace walls while he and Harry slept. While the world wept. While Diana lay in a Paris hospital fighting for a life that the doctors could not save. Something connected to Camilla. And when the details reached him, William broke down. Let me take you back to that night. Not the version the cameras showed. Not the endless replay of the tunnel, the flowers, the candlelit vigils. The version that was happening simultaneously, invisibly behind the palace gates. It was the early hours of August 31st, when the first reports began to filter through. Diana had been in a crash in Paris. Pont de la Mare tunnel. The details were confused. At first, the way early reports always are, when something catastrophic has just happened, and the full picture hasn't assembled itself yet. In Balmoral, the royal family was woken. Charles was informed. The decision was made to let William and Harry sleep until the situation became clearer. In those hours while 2 boys slept, unaware that their world was ending, adults were awake, making decisions, having conversations. And it is those conversations, the ones that happened in those dark, early hours, that have now resurfaced, that have reached William, that have left him, according to those but closest to him, more shaken than he has been since the morning his father told him the news. What was happening behind closed doors, the official account of what happened inside Balmoral that night is carefully simple. A family was woken by terrible news. They grieved. They made decisions about how to proceed. They eventually woke the boys and told them their mother was gone. But sources who have come forward in recent years, people who were inside that world at that time, people who have carried what they know for nearly 3 decades, paint a picture of that night that is considerably more complicated. Because while the grief was real, and nobody who has studied this story doubts that there was genuine shock and sorrow in those rooms, there were other conversations happening alongside it. Conversations about the future, about what Diana's death meant for the institution, about the position of various people within it, about the changes that would now inevitably come. And according to sources close to those who have shared this with William, Camilla's name was in those conversations, not as an afterthought, not as a distant peripheral figure mentioned in passing while the family processed an unimaginable loss, centrally, in ways that, when William was finally told the specifics, hit him in the place where he keeps the 15-year-old boy who lost his mother that night. The specific allegations. Let me be careful here, because this is a story about allegations, about claims made by sources close to the situation, about information that has never been officially confirmed and that the palace has never addressed. North Wire deals in documented patterns, in sourced accounts, in the kind of information that builds a picture even when individual pieces cannot be independently verified. And the picture that these allegations paint is of a palace atmosphere on the night of Diana's death that was not purely consumed by grief. Specifically, sources allege that conversations took place in those early hours about the implications of Diana's death for Camilla's position and for her future relationship with Charles, that while Diana was still alive, fighting in that Paris hospital, while the outcome was still unknown, certain conversations were already happening that suggested some people inside that world were thinking beyond the immediate tragedy, thinking about what comes next, about what this means for us. Sources say that when the specifics of these alleged conversations were shared with William, the reaction was not anger, not the controlled, strategic fury that has driven every deliberate move he has made against Camilla in recent months. Something rawer than that. Something that took him back to being 15. William breaks down. Those close to William describe the moment he received this information with a care and a sadness that tells you everything about what it meant. He was not alone when he heard it. There were people with him, people he trusted, people who have been part of the quiet, careful process of assembling the full picture that has driven everything he has done in recent months. And they watched him receive it, watched the future King of England, the composed, strategic, impossibly disciplined man who has spent his entire adult life managing his grief behind closed doors, break, not for long. William does not stay broken. That too is Diana's gift to him, the resilience. That comes not from suppressing emotion, but from having genuinely processed it, and found a way to carry it forward. But in that moment, for those minutes, he was not the future king, he was a 15-year-old boy again, standing at the beginning of the worst night of his life, and finding out that what was happening around him in those hours was even darker than he had known. Sources say he wept, and then he was quiet for a very long time, and then eventually he straightened, and said something that those present have not forgotten. He said, "She deserved better than all of them." Why this changes everything? There is a question that has always existed underneath the story of William and Camilla, a question that has driven the portrait, and the estate and the confrontation, and the ultimatum and every move he has made, in what has become one of the most remarkable, sustained acts of institutional reclamation in modern royal history. The question is, why now? Why? After decades of patient, disciplined management of his position, did Williams begin to act, begin to move, begin to dismantle Camilla's position with the kind of systematic certainty that has shaken the palace to its core? The answer, the full answer, has always required something we didn't quite have, the specific trigger, the thing that moved William from patient strategy to decisive action. And sources close to the situation now suggest that what he learned about the night Diana died, about what was happening in those rooms, in those conversations, while he and Harry slept and Diana fought for her life, was that trigger, not the only thing he knows, but the thing that made everything else impossible to continue managing quietly, the thing that made him decide, no more patience, no more waiting, it ends now. The palace's response and the wider fallout, the allegations about what happened the night Diana died, to have circulated quietly for years, in private conversations, in the accounts of people who were inside that world, and have slowly, carefully, in the years since Diana's death, begun to share pieces of what they witnessed. The palace has never addressed them, not because the questions haven't been asked. They have, by journalists, by biographers, by the documentary makers who have spent decades trying to assemble the full picture of what the institution looked like from the inside during those years. The palace's consistent response has been the response it always gives when the truth is more damaging than the silence. Nothing but silence, as Northwire has observed many times, is not neutrality. Silence is a choice, and a choice, in the language of institutions, is a statement. The palace chose not to address these allegations when they were whispers. They are now something more than whispers. They have reached Diana's son. They have made him weep and straighten, and say, quietly, in a room with the people he trusts most, she deserved better than all of them, and they are driving every single move he is making now. I want to tell you something about William that sometimes gets lost in the story of the strategic, disciplined, patient future king. He loved his mother, not as a symbol, not as the people's princess of the flowers and the mythology, as a person, as his mum, the woman who took him to McDonald's, and to Thorpe Park, and to homeless shelters, and to hospital wards where children were dying, because she believed that life had to be felt to be understood. The woman who told him that the most important thing a person can do is make someone else feel less alone. The woman who called him on the afternoon of August 30th, 1997, from a hotel in Paris, and said "I love you," and "goodbye," a casual, easy, "see you soon," and never called again. William has never stopped loving her, has never stopped missing her, has never stopped, quietly, privately, in the way that children who lose parents too young carry the loss forever, wondering what she would say, what she would think, whether she would be proud. And now he has learned something about the night she died that he never knew, that in those hours when everything ended, when the world was about to break in a way it has never quite recovered from, the people around him were not purely grieving. Some of them were already thinking about what came next, about their own positions, about the future. While Diana was still breathing, William wept when he heard it, and then he straightened. And now he is acting, not just for himself. For her. Subscribe to Northwire. Drop a comment. Do you think the full truth about that night will ever come out? This community sees what the palace hides. Share this with someone who loves Diana, who believes she deserved better, who wants the truth to finally be known. We upload every single day. We are not done. Thank you for being here on Northwire.